I remember taking the Orange Line to downtown Chicago in my youth. As the CTA train would get closer to the downtown area, I became surrounded by towering apartment buildings and skyscrapers. I always imagine what it must be like to live in a chic urban loft with that exposed brick wall and quirky light fixtures. I romanticized city life in my head, even though I saw the reality in the cart that I sat in. I sat with students from the hood, like me, who were trying to get an education to be the first of their family to possibly apply to university. I sat with service workers who napped during their commute but never missed their stop because the paycheck was too important. I sat with businessmen flying in from Midway Airport that were on their way to the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. I grew up wanting to live downtown and be a woman surrounded by cafes, boutiques, beaches, and more. I wanted to branch out. Funny how I believe that was branching out. Same city, but just different neighborhood. I did manage to get that studio apartment downtown when I landed my first corporate job. And yet the feeling of excitement and joy didn't last very long. Hi friends, you've caught me exploring Dunure Castle and its grounds with my little family. The sun is shining and casting a beautiful glow on the grass, water, and castle ruins. It's peaceful. There is no honking from oncoming traffic or overwhelming flocks of people. I've changed a lot since my 20s. I no longer crave the hustle of city life. When I travel into Glasgow for appointments or errands, I find myself overstimulated and grateful that we get to return to our little seaside town, where all we hear are seagulls. All I want is the quiet of mountains and lochs. As my 30s are almost leaving me, I've begun to write out a bucket list and approach it with determination. My bucket list is all about travel, but not just any travel. I want to continue signing up for multi-day trekking expeditions and see the mountains in Peru, Chile, Argentina, Pakistan, Kyrgyzstan, Mongolia, Nepal, Norway, Cornwall, and Wales. I want to be in valleys where nature's beauty isolates me from the modern day world and trails challenge not only my body, but my mind. So I go to sleep exhausted from pushing every ounce of my being. As more white hairs have sprouted on my head, I've begun to yearn for varying landscapes and understand the cultures and histories which have evolved from them. I find it fascinating how land gives birth to the ways of a people. Land gives a people its truths. Land has given brown communities across the Americas the culture of maize, and this culture has given peoples their creation stories, their ancestry, their belief systems, their economies, their food, their sciences, their art. Everything, really. It explains why maize is foundational to the identity of Mexicanos. The pursuit for wanting to know how united we all really are through the differences of landscape. That's what I desire. I value experiences over designer shoes, handbags, clothes, etc. I think as you age, your philosophy becomes a little more clear. You arrive at questions that concern your history, your identity, and what their implications are regarding society. The pressing desire to know who you are in this world becomes fierce. The underlying reason being that you want to leave this world in a better place, I think. Well, that's how I've evolved. I've set aside the westernized version of success and replaced it with my concern to learn from the world so I can help my community move forward with strength. Interacting with different cultures has made me a better person. The perspectives which I have collected over time has allowed me to reflect and rebuild what I initially was taught inside the classroom and within my home country. While this has led to upset and rage, which I've needed therapy for, I appreciate the gaze which I now have. I'd rather be aware of the growth I need than spend the rest of my life living in a bubble because I'm too afraid to question the dominant narrative. I never want to be taken advantage of, and I don't want people like me to be taken advantage of. We have so much to learn from each other. We have so much to learn from the land that we are from and the land that we live on. Cultural exchanges are invaluable. As human beings, it's our nature to interact. However, borders have made us divisive and less likely to be open-minded and inclusive. We now have hierarchies that label non-Westernized cultures as being inferior. I believe these hierarchies come from a place of hate. How can one quantify cultures and then rank them? Especially because the indigenous origins of all lands are impressively and beautifully unique. As you all know, these hierarchies have one purpose in mind, and that is power at all costs, even if it means dehumanizing a people out of existence. I want my bucket list to help me grow into a more compassionate and resilient individual. I want my bucket list to challenge and refresh my perspective and beliefs. I don't ever want to stop learning. I don't think there's much to life without ongoing education. Friends, what do your bucket lists look like? Comment below and let me know what's on your list. Seeing that I've been living in Scotland for almost 6 years, I've become quite acquainted with its landscapes. The heather, the bog, the quarries, the coastlines, the volcanic rock, mountains, the glens, islands, all of it has enabled me to understand the Scottish culture more and more. I see the landscape influence the art that I've been fortunate enough to experience at art markets and galleries here in Scotland. I see Scotland's love for wool as it is made into so many items for the warmth it provides from the weather, especially when you're in the middle of nowhere and enjoying the isolation of a valley. I hear the dry sense of humor that the Scots conjure from always dealing with the weather and landscapes that are anything but dry. I sit back and hear their stories, embellished with a creative play on words, which can only come from centuries of being forced to stay inside because of torrential rain, which has deepened the well-disguised bogs. Having fallen into a bog hip deep, I can tell you that without the help of my trekking companions, I probably wouldn't have been able to get out on my own. I hope to continue learning from the Scottish landscape. I know it will keep me on my toes. In honor of checking off lists and continuing to move forward, I have finally decided to buckle down and make this lovely shelf that you see in front of you my art hub of some sort. I originally bought this bookshelf as a functional space to work from home, as there is a desk attached to it. I basically threw everything on its shelves, from books to camera stuff. There wasn't really an objective in terms of theme or significance. I just didn't want my things living on the floor collecting dust. But as my art journey has taken off, I have found myself collecting more art supplies and dumping them in any empty shelf available. And the discomforting noise of procrastination of this level of disorganization has been annoying me more and more each day. The tipping point came, unsurprisingly, on a recent trip to the Isle of Iona. Friends, I never thought Iona would happen in my lifetime. The logistics to getting there and the time needed to get there were the main reasons for this. Iona had popped up in my research when I was on track for making higher education my permanent work home. St. Columba, the Vikings, the history of Christianity, mainly its agenda for power and control, medieval politics, all of it fascinated me. I was in awe standing in front of the abbey. I mean, the winds were merciless, but then again, it's April here in Scotland. My time as a researcher feels like it was so long ago. Yet, in that moment, as I stood on St. Columba's writing spot, his former cell where he wrote and edited manuscripts, it felt like the complete opposite. It felt like my journey to Scotland was literally yesterday. And along with that, I remembered why I had chosen medieval history as my focus. I remembered the excitement from doing the research that I was doing. I remember feeling like I had found my way. Nothing else mattered outside of trying to make academia my home at the time. Of course, that all came to a halt though, a halt that should never have happened in my eyes, a traumatic halt, a painful one that tipped me into the deepest depression. A halt that still compromises my mental health up to this day. I came away from visiting Iona pensive. I began to dip, and that dip was tearful. It hurts, and this hurt isn't going anywhere because it didn't happen overnight, or weeks, or months. This hurt began to accumulate way before I officially set foot in academia. Academia didn't lighten the load. It added to the trauma. It added to the depression that I had tried to heal on my own without medication. The past hurt, and despite all the progress I've made, I still have trouble interacting with what used to bring me so much joy. When I got home, I had to do something. I had to bring myself back to what brings me joy in the here and now. And my shelf was my answer. I had to store away items that were no longer serving me and my art journey. I can't look at books from my research days with an untainted fondness. Not yet, and maybe not ever. As for the rest of the books on this shelf of mine, I've decided to move them down to the lower sections. Art is my commitment now, and I need to create the physical space it deserves so it can take up all the space that it needs to flourish in my life. I want to get to a point where art replaces the joy I once had in academia. So I'm decluttering and making space. Each shelf is a tiny home for each medium that I choose to explore. I hope that my art supplies collection continues to grow and grow. I want my shelf to be bursting with creative tools. I'm also a big believer in manifestation, creating what you want with what you have and making decisions that keeps in mind the objective. As a creative, I find myself listening to what my soul needs more than ever. I don't want to force anything anymore that doesn't feel right. Friends, you know yourselves better than anyone, so please listen to that little inner voice. I'm finding my own way to move on, and if that means redecorating every room in my house to feel at peace, then all those Pinterest boards will be made and all the charity shops will be visited. Rearranging my bookshelf might only seem practical, but for me, those small changes are guardrails for my future and eventually, maybe even closure? Who knows? So, friends, get those lists out and perhaps start reflecting on how you would like to go about them and why. Or maybe now is the time to start a list, a bucket list, or a to do list. Any list, really. Give yourself that time to listen to your thoughts, your heart, your soul. Thanks for tuning in, friends. Take good care, and I'll see you next week. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to keep up to date on what I'm doing on this rainy side of the world. All right, friends. See you next week.